Streaming. Hello, everybody. It's the podcast. I'm Garrett Sims. Welcome back. It's Thursday, January 28th. I've been wanting recently to get on a little schedule, like to get an idea. Like I've been going through notes and just trying to be like, more consistent, more precise, and to definitely keep the flow of like, listen, this is when it's going to be, because it's really hard to keep on a schedule. I think everybody knows that. Like, when you put yourself to a schedule, it's really tough. Like, you want it to be a convenience for you, and I just don't want to set a goal that I personally can't back myself up on. But what I've decided is Monday through Wednesday, and then Friday, actually kick Friday out. Okay, kick Friday out. Friday sucks. Monday to Wednesday is going to be a podcast from about anywhere from 2 to 3. That's when that's roughly going to be about. Thursday is normally when I'm going to have Kate on. At least I should. He should have been on today. Texted him, and he was like, nah, dude, I can't do it tonight. And I was like, understandable. Ain't going to hold it against you. I was looking forward to that because, as you know, I say it so many times. Like, I just run out of stuff to talk about. But Thursday is going to be around anytime from 7 to 8. And then Friday is going to be, I think, 12:30 to 1:30, somewhere in between there. It's going to be a little bit earlier in the day because it's Friday. Everybody loves Friday. I'm still not going to do Saturday or Sunday. I feel like you just need time to relax, and there's only so much stuff you can talk about. One of the ideas I've tossed around is just in my free time, I like doing stupid little skits and stuff like that. I've been thinking about doing those. I'm content with where my numbers are, but as you know, like, you always want to keep improving. You always want to be better. Like, you want to build upon everything. So part of that is that I just want to add something. So not going to be like, do you guys want to see that? Because I know, like, there's only, like, 1 or 2 people watching my videos, and it's me, myself. So I'm going to cut that out. Title, Talking Thursday. We're just going to talk a little bit. It's funny because sometimes, I'm going to jump right into this. Sometimes in life we fail. And, failure is a measurement of, like, how many times you fail is going to prove to you if you can succeed or not, because you can't succeed without failure. It goes very hand in hand. That's what I mean by that. And it's funny because I have a story about this. When I first got back here down to Mo State, because we had winter break, and I was getting back to working out again. I was like finally excited because I was like, dude, I can finally work out at the Foster Recreational Center, which is like our gym. It's actually a really nice place. Probably some of the best equipment I ever used in my life. But for me, I just need a rack and a bar and some weights, and I can do about anything. But me and my roommate, we like to box. I've said that multiple times. I love to box for fun. It's absolutely a great workout, great conditioning, great toning, great using like a lot of muscles in your body. Especially if you do it the right way, you can get a good sweat going. So the one day we're boxing, and there's like a rule. I don't know if it's an unwritten rule, but I feel like it is. Like, every time that I've went to a gym, like, there's always this unwritten rule. If you don't know a person, like, you don't talk to them. You let them work out. Like, that's the whole point behind it, is like, you don't want somebody coming up to you and being like, hey man, what, shooting the crap, and you're trying to work out. Like, that's the way I've always thought about it. But I mean, there's times where you obviously need a spotter and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm sitting with my roommate, and we just got done boxing, and there's girls walking around the track like 24/7. I just see this one. This could be embarrassing for me, because I mean, obviously not gonna name any names other than myself, but wow, water. So there's these girls walking around the track, and I just see this one that like just catches my eye, and I'm like, dude, should I do it? I was asking my roommate, I was like, dude, should I ask her for a Snapchat? And of course, like I said, there's like that rule of thumb, like, you don't do that when you're working out. Like, it's just something you don't do. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like trying to work up the confidence. And lately, like, everything in my mind has been like, dude, live your life. Don't be afraid to do something just because you're afraid of the failure, you're afraid of the rejection, because you only get like one life to live. and you gotta make the most out of it. So I'm sitting here and I'm waiting. I'm like, dude, I'm gonna do it. Like, I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm gonna do it. I don't care. I'm gonna ask this girl for a Snapchat. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, my heart's racing, and I'm sitting there, and I walk up to her, and I catch her completely off guard. Like, she looked like she was about ready to karate chop my friggin' artery in my neck because I just caught her so off guard. Like, she's like, what's going on? And I was like, I think you're really pretty. Can I have your Snapchat? And at that moment, I'm shaking. You would probably guess that I don't know. I was just shaking. Like, it looked like my body was having an earthquake. And so she sits there, looks at me for a second, and says, "Oh, of course." And I'm like, dude, there's no way that just works. Like, I look at my roommate, and then I look back at her, and I'm like, I'm in disbelief. And I hand her my phone, and I said, "Here, can you type it in?" And she's like, "Oh, of course." And she's sitting there with her friend, and her friend's giggling, and I just find it hilarious. And she puts it in, and I hit add, and I walk back to my roommate, and I'm like, dude, I just don't understand how that worked. Like, I'm like, there's no way, like, anybody with common, like, not, like, anybody that's working out with common sense will be like, oh, what are you doing talking to me? I'm trying to work out, like, just the rule of thumb thing. So I go back home, I'm excited, like, I'm like, dude, there's no way this worked, and obviously I thought she would, like, add me back quickly. Well, this is where the story of failure starts to come into place. One minute of, like, oh man, she's going to have me back real fast. And then you go 30 minutes, and then you go an hour, and then you go 2 hours to 4 hours till, okay, maybe she'll do it in the morning. Maybe she just forgot. And then you wake up the next morning and there's still no notification. And then the next day there's no notification. You're like, well, maybe she just totally forgot my name. And like, well, to this day, she still has not added me back. But, my point in this is, you're going to fail like that. It's not, this is mainly talking to the boys. And, not mainly my friends, because they would know that I'm the worst possible guy at trying to get girls. But I'm just saying, you can fail as many times as you want. I just let it be a learning curve. Like, it gives you the confidence to be like, yeah, sure. Now, of course, when I showed up to the gym the next couple days and then the next week, it was really awkward because every time I seen her, I was like, oh, man, that is, like, super awkward. And I'm trying not to look at her, and she's trying not to look at me. And I'm just like, man, I feel embarrassed at this point, So, rule of thumb, I would probably stick to the unwritten rule of the gym of not asking a girl for a number or even interrupting somebody while they're working out. Start with that. I don't know. I've just learned a very valuable lesson from that, and but don't be afraid to do something. Like if you want to truly do something, like if you see somebody, and you're like, man, I want to ask her for a number. Do it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the failure that goes with it, because chances are you may ask 9 girls, and guess what? None of them may never add you back. I don't know if I said that right. None of them may ever add you back, okay? But the 10th time you ask, maybe she does. And, it's all building off there. And, it's just a confidence thing. So if there's a message about this failure that I'm trying to convey, it's that don't let it stop you from doing what you want to do. Don't be afraid of it, because you're going to fail at some point. And I'm just using this gym example as a great intro to the motivational message I'm trying to convey to you, is that whether it's trying something new, whether it's trying to get a job or do an activity that you want to, learning a class, doing art, boxing, doing stuff in the gym, lifting, whatever it is, don't be afraid of the failure that's going to come with it, because you're going to fail. Me and you are human beings. We're going to fail. We're not perfect. We'll never be perfect. We'll never be able to pick up a task and say, hey, man, we're great at it. We're going to fail. It's just sticking with it and understand that the results are going to come later. And I talked about this in one of my first videos. And I had to learn it. I had to learn this one of the hard ways, and it's still something I battle with today. Like, the fear of failure and the fear of rejection. Like, it's nothing you should be scared of. If somebody doesn't want to, say somebody doesn't want to hang out with you, or a girl doesn't want to add you back, listen, that's their fault. That, they're missing out on that. That's the way you got to look at it. So don't be afraid of failure, because eventually you're going to reach that success. I mean, you are. Just how it's going to work. I'm in a class right now called COM 115, and it's about public speaking. And a lot of people, see, this is where I think I have the advantage over them, because everybody's like, oh, I hate public speaking. Like, I hate getting out in front of people. And I think I seriously have an advantage when it comes to this, because I'm telling you right now, between me on the podcast, this isn't just like me behind a camera and a mic. Like, I could do this literally in front of people. I could stand on the corner of the busiest street and just give a speech and not have a problem. There could be one person watching, there could be 5 million people watching, and I would not struggle with that. That's one of my biggest strong suits. So, we were talking today, our teacher was talking to us, and she's like, listen, like, what scares you about public speaking? Like, what, there's like all these stages to it, and, like the nervousness, the shaking, the confrontational stage, and I'm just like, I go up there, and I know that, I'm going to say something, okay? Whether people want to listen or not, I don't care. I hope everybody likes it, because there's always that part of me that's like, that's probably the step I most agree with, like, the audience's feedback. But other than that, I could go up there and hit a total curveball speech that nobody could ever cheer for or not clap, and it could just be awkward silence. I'm going to sit up there and do it. Like, I don't have a problem embarrassing myself in front of millions of people. And that's just because, I guess that's part of who I am. So, like, I'm sitting there in class and we're talking, like, fears and stuff like that, and they're like, we just don't like getting out in front of people. I'm like, I don't really care. Of course there's that, little part inside of you that's like, oh, well, I don't want to do it. Like, if somebody said, go streaking down the friggin' main street of the college campus, I'd be, like, reluctant to do it, obviously, because who wants to do that? Like, I don't want to do it. But if somebody was like, here's $100, do it, I'd be like, oh, hell yeah. I'm going to do that, yeah. Sounds $100? I had a buddy, actually. This is funny. I wasn't even there that night. I forgot what I was doing. I think it was a college. And I actually had a buddy who tased his nuts for $100. And if you think that's crazy, if you think that's any bit crazy, he was going to do it again for another $100. That's hilarious. Mason, if you ever see this, which I know you probably won't, man, the question starts begging me, did you really like it that much to want to do it again? Because if somebody tased me, even for $100, I'd be like, you know what, that's it, I got my $100, I'm walking away, I can probably still have kids. A second time, I don't know if I'm having kids. That question starts to pop up, like, am I actually going to be able to have kids if I tase my nuts again? I'm telling you, man, some of the stuff we do will literally shock people. And this is funny because it all goes back to K-Bob's house. Like, we did about everything you could think of inside that house, and that's why I am on such a goal. If I could ever get enough money, I talk about it too much, and I'll talk about it later. But that's why if I ever got enough money, man, I would totally buy that house back in a heartbeat. I'd just be like, listen, everybody put their stuff back. We're buying this house. It is going to be just like old times. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. I don't know. But there was one night in particular that I think my buddy Tanner had ran over a pigeon. I think it was a pigeon, some sort of bird. I don't know. I don't really remember too much. And he's sitting there trying to nurture it. Like, he's feeding it. He's going to the cabinet, getting wheat thins and other crackers of sorts and trying to feed it and trying to see. And he's like, I don't know if this bird's ever going to get back to flying shape. And at this time, like, they were starting to move out Caleb's house. This is when it was starting to be sold because, moving and stuff like that. Hate moving. Worst thing ever, man. I wish you just... I've never had to really move, but I've seen a lot of people move, and it still sucks because it's like all the memories that you've ever made. So I can't imagine a family that would have to go through like moving 2 to 3 times, at least, like, say throughout school, like moving 2 to 3 times, like that would kill me. I'd be like, wow, I can't imagine not living in the house that I live in because it's insane. But go back to all this. He's trying to feed this bird, whatever. We're having a fun night. It was like one of those nights that you know that it's just like those are the nights you're gonna miss. You're gonna miss those the most. So we're all in the living room, and Tanner and somebody was in Caleb's room with the bird, and all of a sudden we hear screaming. So we run back to the back room, and the bird started to fly. And Tanner was like, "Oh man, maybe it's finally good to go. Like maybe it's fine. Like we're gonna go release this thing." And everybody's kind of reluctant because it's like, it's a bird, whatever. So Tanner goes outside, and he's like, "Okay, you ready, birdie?" He throws the thing up, and I'm telling you, I've never seen something plummet back to the ground so fast. All you heard was, it hit the ground, and I'm sitting there, I'm looking at Tanner, I'm like, dude, what just happened? So we run down the stairs, we go check at it, and it was dead. It was probably moving a little bit, but we knew it kind of was dead, and we were like, you know what? Not trying to be an animal cruelty guy. That's not what I mean. Okay, the intentions were right. Okay, we were trying to help nurture it. Okay, it's just we misjudged the flying part. And Tanner had already, I think ran over it with his truck. So at that point, kind of like amazed that it could even muster up enough strength to like get a few feet in the air. So I don't know, but I'm talking about, and you guys are like, well, why do you have such a emotional, I wouldn't even say emotional, but why such a connection with this K-Bob's house? Like, we don't even know who he is. And I hope Caleb will ever get on the show sometime, so that way he can talk and just tell us about, he can definitely tell you about all the stupid stuff I've done there. But you're like, why do you talk about it so much? Like, do you have a hard-on over it? Do you want to, like, do the house? I mean, it's just something that I talked about so much before, that, like, when you have so many memories, and, like, you think about it, this was in a span of a year, and you have over, say, a year, 365 days, when you have over at least 700 memories in that house over a year time, like, it just feels so, attached, like, and, and I think that was the hardest part for all of us, like, moving out, like, we just didn't really understand. And that night that Tanner did the thing with the bird, I actually recorded my buddy Nick and my buddy Cade, you guys know Cade, I recorded them arguing, and I was like, this is going to be hilarious, I'll turn it into a parody of Full House. I was like, make it like a drama show, whatever, have them just arguing, and then kind of throw some cool stuff. I will upload that. I gotta text Nick and Xavier to make sure that's okay that I upload. I already asked Cade. I said, Cade, look it over, make sure there's nothing in it that like you don't, want going out there. But I thought it was like the funniest thing ever, and it just, I look back on that every once in a while, and I'm like, those are the nights you don't get. Like, you just don't get them sometimes. You don't get them until they're gone. You're like, wow, it's gone, and now I miss it bad. And I guess that's just part of growing up, and realizing that like, things are gonna happen, and people are going to go different directions, and we always kind of said in our group, like we said that we don't want to go a different way. Like we always want to be us, and we always want to be like, if somebody needs help, we'll always be there because that's just who we are. And, like, no matter how far we go away, like, because I can tell you right now, Kate is not leaving Odessa, so I don't have to worry about him going anywhere too far. But, everybody else is going to go some sort of different direction, and eventually, you're not going to see them on an everyday basis, but that's okay because, when, like, you need help, they'll be there. And I think that's the part that tore me up the most about that whole ordeal, about, selling that house, because it just meant, like, that's where we hung out. That's where it was kind of like mostly an open door policy, like anybody could come in, and if they're having a bad day, they could sit down on the couch and have a fun time because you knew something fun was always happening. Now, the neighbors may have hated us because we loved playing Rock Band at 3 a.m, but, I mean, it's just, people are going to be like, you're crazy, and then there's going to be some people that are going to be like, I totally get what you're saying. And And I talk about it so much because, there's not a day that goes past where I'm like, man, I missed that. And if there's any time or any chance that I can bring us united again like that with, something that means so much like that house. And that's why I work so hard at this podcast. I work so hard on this YouTube channel to get on every day because, I want to inspire people that, like, your dreams aren't that hard to accomplish if you can just put your mind to it. All you have to do is go on every day and just do something that appeals to the millions of people on this earth. And that's where I'm at, and I've talked about it. I don't want to sound like a broken record because I talk about it so much, but it's just hilarious to me because, watching people, and one of the YouTubers we watched the most when we were hanging out was Danny Duncan. And, a lot of people love him. Some people don't like him. That's just the way it goes. But I mean, when you truly watch Danny Duncan and you see some of the stuff he does, you're like, that's reckless and irresponsible, but it's funny. Like, it's not funny in a way where, people are getting hurt. Like people aren't getting hurt. It's just all in good fun. It's like the stuff that you would do with your best friends if you had the money to do those type of things. And I was like, dude's such a nice guy. If you actually watch his videos and get to, like, looking and seeing, like, what he's about, like, he is such a great guy. And I don't think he gets enough recognition for what he does. Truly, I think he's got a lot of money. He makes probably more than I will ever see just on his merch, and that's awesome. And what he does with that money, and the people that he helps out is just tremendous. And he actually brought a lot of us together. Like, we would go into Caleb's, we would sit down on the couch, and we knew we were watching Danny all night, and we would just be so ecstatic to just be there with everybody and be there with the boys and the girls that would be over, and just be like, man, like, this is so much fun. And so I'm going to go ahead and move off that. Okay, don't want to get too emotional, okay? Sports, we're going to get into that because I love talking sports. Sports is such a monumental factor in my life. Just like it's going to be a monumental trade wherever Deshaun Watson goes. Sorry about that. It was a little ASMR right there. Listen, I think it's crazy. I'm about to throw a theory that will blow everybody's socks off. Okay? And I know what you're thinking. Like, hear me out. Strap on the seatbelt. Sit down in the chair. Look me in the eyes. Here we go. Craziest theory that I think is going to happen this offseason. Listen. Matthew Stafford is going to get traded. Deshaun Watson has been requested to be traded. And I think that wherever Deshaun Watson goes, they're going to have a quarterback to give back. And it's not going to be an average quarterback it's not going to be like a Drew Lock or Daniel Jones or Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins. Listen, it's got to be a guy that's talented, and I think there's a couple guys I think that fits the bill. I think the Jets make a lot of sense to me. If I had to rank these, I think the Jets make a lot of sense. I think Deshaun Watson for Sam Darnold, their first-round pick this year, maybe a first-round pick and a second-round pick. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it makes more sense for the Texans because, listen, the Texans aren't going to trade him to a contender. That's how sports work. I have nailed the door on the freaking coffin talking about it because I just don't think that they'll trade him to a contender in the AFC. They might in the NFC, but they just don't want to see that. Like, if they ever want to have a chance of being contenders again, they don't want to have to face Deshaun Watson. It's how that goes. But I think the Jets make a lot of sense. They're a couple pieces away. They're quite a bit of ways from being like a Super Bowl team. Now, can they be a contender with Deshaun Watson automatically? Yeah. I mean, they got enough offensive weapons to hold their own because Deshaun Watson's that great of an improviser, that good of a scrambler, and that good of a quarterback where he can raise them up on another level. I think it would be a worse Seattle Seahawks would be Deshaun Watson on the Jets. But I think the Jets aren't going to keep Sam Darnold, so Sam Darnold will automatically go to the Texans. Make a lot of sense for me. One place, and the reason this isn't my number one, because I think this makes a whole hell of a lot of sense, and I haven't heard anybody talk about it, and I don't get why, and I might get called an idiot. Deshaun Watson to the Lions. I don't really get why nobody's talking about it. The Lions have a lot of picks. They have a good pick this year. Texans are going to get Stafford. I don't know if that's necessarily where Stafford wants to go, but it would be Texas. That would be his home state. I think it would make a lot of sense. I think they would have enough, the Lions would have enough to get a package for Deshaun Watson. I think it makes sense. I seriously think it makes more sense to go to the Lions, and on top of that, the Lions would be contenders. They got a young running back who's not terrible. They got two really good wide receivers. Now, one of them is a free agent, I will say that. But if you can land Deshaun Watson, maybe he wants to come back. That makes that decision a lot easier. Like, now you're actually going to play with an MVP caliber quarterback, a decent tight end, T.J. Hawkinson, I think it's Galladay and Jones. Is that right? I think so, yeah. Those two are a very good 1-2 combo. I mean, that offense would start. Now, maybe it wouldn't have the offensive line and it wouldn't have the defense, but they would contend a lot faster if they went to Lions. So if the Lions are hearing this, I think it makes the most sense. You know, obviously, I think you're going to have to give up Stafford, but Stafford would do fine down with the Texans. You know, it would basically be, you know, and I'm not saying that Deshaun Watson and Stafford are the same equivalent, because I think Watson's better. But if you look at it from a standpoint, like, the Lions get significantly better, and the Texans may get a little bit better considering what they could get back. Obviously, I think it would take a first-round pick this year. I think it would take a first-round pick next year. I think it would take 2 first-round picks. I would think it would take 2 seconds, maybe a third. I don't know what all they're looking for. Trades are really, really weird. The Bills had to give up 2 1s to Minnesota for Diggs, and then you seen what the Cardinals gave up for D-Hop. Like, it just matters on the organization. So I don't necessarily know for sure what would go down, but I think that makes the most sense to me. And I'm going to go with my third destination. My third best destination for him to go is back to the Texans. Listen, I still think that, yes, the owner should have included you more in the talks. I get that. He promised you. This is the difference. If he didn't promise you, you have no reason to be upset. But since he promised you that, you deserve to be upset. You deserve to raise a little bit of hell because you're like, listen, you told me that I'd be included in this, and then you basically said, no, we changed our minds. And I totally get that if I'm Deshaun. I 100% get that. I get why you're upset. But at the end of the day, your worst season was last year. Other than that, you've been a pretty gosh darn good team. Like, they surrounded you with weapons. Minus this year. And that's just because you're going to have I think they have some bad contracts. I think J.J. Watt's one of those contracts. But other than 1 year, they've been good to you. They took away your number 1 wide receiver, which was ridiculous. If I were the owner, I would have fired everybody after that. But, you know, the point is that if you just get a true number 1 wide receiver that is close, I'm not going to say top 5 wide receiver. If you get a top 10 wide receiver, maybe even top 15, number 1, you would be back competing. Because I'm going to tell you this right now, Jacksonville isn't going to be ready in a year. The Colts still have a quarterback issue, and they're going to have to fill it with the right guy. And maybe that is Stafford. I don't know. I think that Wentz would be a better fit, but I don't know if the Eagles want to give up Wentz. Listen, that division is not a runaway, no matter what you think. Bolster up on defense. Get yourself a wide receiver 1. You just have to earn Deshaun's trust back. And listen, you have the executive power. You don't have to cut him. You don't have to trade him. If you want to let him sit and try to earn your trust back, or try to have him get the trust back, whatever. You get what I'm trying to say here, okay? If you want to let him sit on the bench, maybe he sits on the bench. Maybe he doesn't even show up. There's going to be a competitor in him. Maybe if you show signs that you're going to go out and get him weapons and improve the team, maybe for a second he'll come back. I think it's still too soon. I think it all needs to boil over because I still think the situation is too hot. I think if they did something now, if they truly did something now, they would regret it in the future because they have no interest in trading. They don't want to do it. That's my top 3 destinations. I think they're the only 3 that make sense. I think for the 49ers to trade for him is a little bit ridiculous. I do think the Bears make sense. I think it would make them a Super Bowl contender. That's a bold take, but I seriously think it would make the Bears a Super Bowl contender because they have the wide receiver 1. They got a decent rookie tight end. They got a great defense. It's just that defense back is so sore from carrying the offense that it's not even funny. Like, we've seen great defenses, but if you don't have an average offense, you're not doing anything. Like, that defense can only carry you so far. So that's why I think it would be a Super Bowl contender. That defense is too good. They would finally have an above-average offense. Right now it's below average, and you could even stretch it to say it's even worse than that, okay? But I think that makes sense. I think the Dolphins make no sense. I just, to do that would obviously make you a Super Bowl contender, but at the price it's going to cost you is going to hurt you. It's going to be, hear me out, it's going to be more of a win in 3 or 4 years rather than win amongst a 10-year period because you're going to build, right now you're building the clay. You're building the sandcastle. You're letting it take its form. You get to build it from the ground up, okay? And let's just say you take a piece of it off and whatever, you're still going to be, you take a piece of that sandcastle for, a little bit of a little trade-off for a better piece, meaning Deshaun Watson, you're still going to have a chunk missing because Deshaun Watson isn't going to fill everything that you're going to lose for him. Because it's not going to be a Tua Tagovailoa for Deshaun Watson straight up. That ain't going to happen. Texans should be smart enough to know they're not going to do it unless they get a horse load in return. That's why I don't think it makes sense. Patriots maybe make sense. I don't think they have a lot to trade unless you can trade cap room. I think the Falcons make a little bit of sense. I think there's a lot more NFC teams that make sense to me than AFC. I think the Jets are really the only ones in the AFC. People were saying the Broncos. I just don't see the Broncos doing it. They would have to give up a lot. I mean, it would just end up turning into the Houston Texans of the AFC, like this year's Houston Texans of the AFC. It doesn't make sense to me. But that's my 2 cents on Deshaun Watson. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I just seriously think, man, Stafford for Watson, that makes sense. Lions fans are going to be super happy. I think Texans fans would be happy with the quarter. Like, they're not going to be as happy, but they're going to be like, listen, like, we can handle Stafford. And my biggest knock is, listen, I don't want the NFL turning into the NBA. I don't want people saying, listen, I'm going to go join, I want you to trade me to that team so we can build a super team. I do not want that to happen. I hate it. That's the one thing I hate about the NBA. I'm okay with player mobility. I think player mobility is fine. I think in free agency you should sign wherever you want to, but I feel like loyalty should play a factor. And maybe that's too much from a fan's perspective, somebody that is a huge fan. I think loyalty should play a factor. I think it's ridiculous to sign with the franchise for 5 years and after 2 of not being a contender, or maybe you're out in the first round of the playoffs, to be traded to another contender is ridiculous. I don't think the NFL is going to go that way. They were like, oh, is the NFL going to turn into the NBA and all these Listen, the Deshaun Watson situation is really unique. It's just really unique because it all falls back on the owner. The owner was an idiot. The executives were idiots. They shouldn't have done what they did. They should have just said, listen, we're going to hire somebody. You don't consult your players. Your players don't decide their management. That's how you have problems. I just think it was a unique situation. Now, if you want to say, oh, go look at Stafford, well, listen, that was mutual. The Lions were kind of ready to move off of him. Too many injuries. Good quarterback, very underrated, but just too many injuries. And I'll be honest with you, I thought they had a good offense. I said it earlier when talking about Watson. I just think that they had a good offense, and for where they finished is kind of lackluster on their part, and I think it's kind of in both interests that they did split apart. That's what that is. The Jared Goff situation is interesting. I still think to this day that Carson Wentz was a better quarterback. Carson Wentz can do more. I still think Carson Wentz can do more. He just needs a coach that's going to bring the confidence, install that back into the player that Carson Wentz is. So this offseason is going to be one of the greatest quarterback offseasons we've ever seen. Because I seriously would be surprised if Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts are on the same team going into the summer about ready to start a new season. I would be shocked. Stafford's going to go somewhere. Obviously, Watson might. I seriously think there's that instinct in my gut that tells me he won't, but it's going to be a very interesting offseason. Mitch Trubisky is going to go somewhere. I don't think the Bears want him. I don't think there's a whole lot of teams. I think maybe like Bill Belichick, I think he would honestly fit there because Bill Belichick's offense, like he kind of reminds me of, he's not very mobile. You know, he's got an okay arm. Kind of reminds me of Tom Brady without the success, which is insane. Nobody should be comparing Mitch to Tom Brady because Tom Brady is a different breed. But I'm just saying, like, you look at it, he's obviously better than Stidham. He's better than Hoyer. I think Matt Nagy did a terrible job with him. So, quit wrapping up. We're going to wrap things up with the NFL. Jake Paul's getting another fight. I feel like I've talked about him a lot, even though there's probably not a lot, but I feel like I've talked about him a lot. He's going to be fighting a UFC fighter, Ben Askren. I've watched various videos on it, and I don't watch a lot of UFC. I watch like some of the highlights and stuff like that. I like the McGregor fights and the big name guys. Like sometimes boxing, I'll watch Mayweather or along those lines, or Tyson Fury versus Wilder. But the point is I've done my research, and Ben is a type of UFC fighter. He's more of a wrestler. He's not like a big striker, is what I've kind of learned, like watching stuff. He's more of a dodger, like he's going to be defensive about things. He's not going to blow you with big, hard blows. But I feel like I'm not knocking Jake Paul because that's not what I want to do. But for who he's fought and who he's going to fight, to talk so much garbage is insane. Somebody needs to humble him. I don't know if that's going to be Ben Askren. Do not know if that's going to be it at all. It's going to be an interesting fight because I think it makes Ben very motivated. The fact that, like, I feel like Ben comes into this fight the underdog because all Jake does is pick on little fighters that are like, oh, you weren't so good in the UFC. Oh, come fight me. Like, he's fastest knockout in the UFC history. Ben Askren. And it's going to be interesting because you can train all you want. You can have all the hard hits you want during training, whatever. But when it comes down to the ring, it's a different story. You know, it's not Rocky where you're going to be facing a 7-foot-tall Russian robot. You know, watching Rocky and then watching real boxing, it's like two different things. But I think it's going to be it's good for the sport. Cade mentioned it a little bit. But it is good. It is good for boxing because now you're starting to see a younger generation like fall in love with boxing, and you're starting to hear more people talk about it because I got to give Jake Paul credit where it's due. He has got more people talking about boxing than I remember that I've been alive. Like, I can't remember sitting down with my dad talking about boxing that I have now. Like, it's insane. And so he has been doing a great thing for the sport. Truly amazing. Somebody is going to come humble him. I think if he does get the fight with McGregor, I will be very surprised. But if he did, I feel like if he could pull off a win against McGregor, which I don't think he could, I think a lot of people would start putting respect. I think if he beats this Ben Askren, I think that it doesn't really change anybody's narrative on him. He just picks on fighters that aren't really good to begin with. But it's interesting. It's good for the sport. It's good for boxing. It's good to see UFC, see guys stepping into the boxing ring and showing their multi-talented skills, multi-versatile. I am still on the freaking bandwagon for Amanda Nunes to face off against Jake Paul because that is a fight that Jake Paul is losing, and I would say fastest knockout ever. Put him in the octagon, Amanda Nunes would kick the living dog cow out of Jake Paul, and I would pay so much money to see it. Dana White said something about it, and I was like, and I was like, dude, that makes sense. I would pay for that. I would pay to watch Jake Paul get creamed by Amanda Nunes. Normally, I'm going to move away for food for thought for a little bit because obviously I don't think I have enough people watching to answer that. I might change up how I do that. So Friday, tomorrow, exciting. I'm going to have Cade on. I'm going to see what time he can do it. So it's going to very well depend on when I do this. I'd like to keep it at my normal time, but I know he works. I'm in college. We got stuff to do. So just be prepared for it. We're going to try to shift more towards a schedule. Thank you guys so much for listening. For those that did, I appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday night. My name is